Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be going over 8 teams. Yes, 8 teams that right now I can guarantee you, unless something crazy happens with injuries, will make the Sweet 16. Now, guys, we all know there are upsets in the NCAA tournament, but we also do normally have a lot of 1 seeds, a lot of 2 seeds, a lot of 3 seeds make the Sweet 16. And that's one of the things that we want when it comes to our brackets. It's so important. It's actually more important to have the Sweet 16 teams than predicting a crazy 15-2 upset. That only gets you a certain number of points. How it's allocated, you would much rather have more Sweet 16 teams than predicting one crazy upset. So in terms of the 8 teams, this is probably going to be a boring video, but these are just teams I'm very confident will make the Sweet 16. The first team being the number 1 overall team in the country analytically. It is Houston. Let's not overcomplicate things. We understand what happened last year with Purdue, the number 1 seed, losing in round 1, but it's extremely unlikely. Houston is locked into a 1 seed. They're guaranteed to win in round 1. They're facing an 8 or a 9 seed. The only team I would be worried about for any 1 seed in terms of the second round is Michigan State. Whoever potentially draws Michigan State, I might have to rethink, but right now, Houston, it's not just the defense, it's not just the narrative about them going to the Big 12. How would they be? They're amazing, but they also do have significant offensive firepower. You can see that is 4 players with a rating above a 3, which is very impressive in terms of offensive efficiency for Houston. And they do have 2 top guards as well, both seniors. Senior-laden team. The pedigree is there for Houston. They've been extremely good the past few years. Let's not overthink this. I don't 1000% trust Houston to make a deep run. I mean, they could lose in the Sweet 16 and that would be considered a big upset, but in terms of just making the Sweet 16, let's not overthink it. This is a team, they're the number 1 team in terms of defense, they're the number 12 team in terms of offense. They're almost top 10 in both categories. The only thing I'm worried about with them is free throw shooting. That is not great in terms of free throw shooting, right near around 300. That could be a red flag in terms of advancing to the Elite 8. But let's understand, this is a 1 seed. They're 6-3 in terms of quad 1 road games. They're 12-3 overall in quad 1 games. They are going to make the Sweet 16. The next team that I can guarantee is going to make the Sweet 16, believe it or not, it is Purdue. Think about the reverse psychology of Purdue. Losing in the first round last year. The narrative with Virginia. Guys, I was one of the people that actually predicted Virginia after losing to UNBC. I said they would win the national title in my bracket. That's why I had the 99 percentile bracket back in 2019. Or whenever Virginia ended up winning. But Matt Painter, we know he struggled. Listen, this Purdue team, the way they're structured, it is very similar to last year. They beat up on a pretty crappy Big Ten. Like, there's no other great teams in the Big Ten, let's be honest. And at this point, you look at their roster, it's Zach Edey and pretty much no one else. I mean, you've got, look, it is what it is with Purdue. I would just be really shocked if Purdue back-to-back 1 seed, completely flops and misses the Sweet 16 both times. It would not happen. They're not going to have Purdue matched up with Michigan State in the second round either, because that would be Big Ten versus Big Ten. I like Purdue by process of elimination to make the Sweet 16, but I'll be honest, I might have Purdue losing in the Sweet 16. It's the same setup as last year. I can't see them losing in the first round. They're going to get a crappy 8 or 9 seed, maybe a Mississippi State. They're not going to lose to them, at least you would hope not. And then I could see them losing in the Sweet 16. The problem is the lack of guard play for Purdue. Either way, I think they're guaranteed to make the Sweet 16. The next team, it is Connecticut. And I tried with UConn. I said I didn't like them earlier in the season. But at this point, UConn, what they did last year, winning the national title, they have been, at least in the past decade, a very volatile program, meaning they can either be really elite like they were last year or really average. But this is a good Big 12 this year, and they just ran through it. I mean, you did have the brutal loss at Creighton, but it's on the road. It's against a solid top 15 team. You're not going to put a ton of stock into that. We'll see what happens against Marquette on the road. That'll be another interesting game, and then maybe a sneaky tough road game at Providence. But either way, this team is just loaded on offense, and they're senior laden. Their 2 top players are both seniors. They're both guards, They check a lot of boxes. They're a guaranteed Sweet 16 team, let's be honest. Top 3 overall offensive efficiency, top 15 in defensive efficiency. They're going to be facing an 8 or a 9 seed in the second round, and that's just another team you can add to your tally of correctly predicting the Sweet 16 teams. The next team, it is Arizona. Now, we're not exactly sure where Arizona is going to be ranked in terms of seed line. They're probably either going to be a 1 or a 2 seed. Arizona is the type of team where if they are a 1 seed, I would probably predict them to the Final Four at least. I think Arizona is going to have a really good year. This is a very similar setup to Purdue. Tommy Lloyd, they're not going to get bounced again early after losing to Princeton last year in the first round. I think I did have Arizona going to the Final Four last year. It was a crippling loss for me with them losing in the first round to a 15, but I don't think it's going to happen again, whether they're a 2 or a 1. They've got a game on the road at UCLA and then at USC, 2 very winnable games to end the season. The setup for Arizona is, like, I can't really jazz them up too much just because the Pac-12 is such a bad conference. I mean, they did have a really early season win on the road at Duke. It's a solid win, but you can't put a ton of stock into it. A neutral court win against MSU. They beat Alabama. You lost to Purdue, kind of a higher scoring game. I just think Arizona this year is going to be a lot better than last year. They did add Caleb Love, veteran leader, guard, going to have the ball in his hands. We know he's had significant tournament experience coming from North Carolina. Caleb Love was almost on Michigan. Could you imagine that? But no, I think Arizona, let's not overcomplicate it. They will make the Sweet 16. They've got too much firepower. They had the situation losing in the first round last year. It's a similar narrative to Purdue. Moving on to the next team that I can guarantee will make the Sweet 16, it is Tennessee. Tennessee is a load this year. They've got the narrative with a potential National Player of the Year guard. They're 23-6, 13-3 in conference, the number 7 overall team. I really like Tennessee to make possibly an Elite 8 run this season. They've had such a good run under Rick Barnes as well. It would really surprise me, even though you could argue their offense, at least in comparison to these other teams, is lacking a little bit. And I would have to see maybe their second round matchup, which 7 or 10 seed they might face. You know, if they get a tough 7 seed, it could be, an issue. But Tennessee is a team that I could see very easily going to the Final Four or the national title. I think they're set up really well. But either way, I've got them at least advancing to the Sweet 16. The next team I guarantee will make the Sweet 16, it is Duke. So Duke very quietly is just a really well put together team that is not really dealing with the one and done thing where it's not like they've got elite talent, but they're all young. A lot of these guys are in their second, third, fourth year, 23-6 in ACC play. It's not all that impressive because the ACC is down, but recently they've had, in their last 4 games, 2 game scores of 100. They just destroyed Virginia. They did lose to Wake Forest. It was a tough game on the road. They destroyed Miami. They destroyed Louisville. They're crushing everyone right now. It'll be interesting to see that last game of the season, the rivalry game against North Carolina. But you look at their roster, and they are very deep. They're led by Jeremy Roach, senior. Flapowski, everyone thought he was going to be a one and done. He comes back. He nearly suffers a catastrophic injury during the court storming and then has just a courageous comeback. Mark Mitchell, sophomore. You do have a few freshmen as well, but you've got glue guys on this team. So I like this Duke team to minimum make the Sweet 16. I think they've got too much offensive talent in terms of that. Moving on to the next team, it is Illinois. Illinois, the number 15 team analytically right now, 22-7. They were without their best player, Terrence Shannon Jr., several games, middle of the season. If they would have had him, possibly you're looking at a 2 or a 3 seed, very likely going to be on the 4 line. This is kind of like my 1-4 seed that I'm guaranteeing. I think Duke's probably going to be a 3 seed, Illinois a 4 seed. And yeah, you really can't, like in terms of the Big Ten, I'm not ultra impressed by this performance. I mean, it's a good record in the Big Ten. Really, any conference road games are kind of hard, but this is a team that has 3+ elite offensive players in terms of efficiency. They're going to run through a 13 seed, probably Louisiana Tech. That's who I'd imagine they'd face. I always see them facing Louisiana Tech in brackets. And then in the second round, they're not going to have a problem, whoever they face. I think they'll be fine going to the Sweet 16. They could have a real run, honestly, catch lightning in the bottle based on their offensive firepower. I would be very surprised if Illinois went home early. Moving on to the next team that I guarantee will make the Sweet 16, it is Alabama. Alabama right now, the number 10 overall team analytically. They do have 9 losses. They had a very hard non-conference schedule. Bama has one of the most efficient offenses we've ever tracked. If you look at Ken Palm, they do have, I think, the number 2 most efficient offense ever. You know, T-Rank has them as a top 2 offense in college basketball this year. They did just lose to Tennessee at home. Their defense is certainly terrible. I mean, they allowed 117 points in regulation against Kentucky. The thing is, in terms of the first 2 rounds, if Alabama's a 4 seed, I don't see them facing enough firepower to lose. I mean, they've got like 5+ offensive players, elite offensive players in terms of efficiency. I think Alabama, Mark Sears possibly finishing 2nd or 3rd in terms of National Player of the Year. The transfer from Ohio in his 2nd season now with Alabama, 4th-year player, seasoned player. This is a team, they're really bad defensively, but to me, they're good enough on offense. I do not see them getting upset. Sure, they could lose to a team better than them, and we just saw them at home lose to Tennessee. We saw them lose on the road at Kentucky. I'm not saying Alabama's going to go to the Final Four. I think it's impossible for them to go to the Final Four because they don't have a good enough defense. But if you're talking about facing these mid-major teams, Alabama is just going to overwhelm them in the first round and then whoever they face in the second round, unless they get into a game where they face a team like Indiana State. That could be an annoying one. There's a few matchups, but I think by and large, Alabama should be a team that at least makes the Sweet 16. These are just Sweet 16 teams. Now, as for the top teams that I did not include, these are teams that I think could get upset within the first or second round. It would be Auburn, Iowa State, Marquette, Kansas, Creighton, North Carolina. Those would be the teams that I could see getting upset within the first 2 rounds. All the other teams I think should win unless they get a crazy bad draw, at least until the Sweet 16. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.